I think that's the tricky part with CrossFit, obviously, is like all the variance that's happening. Where with running, it's like, if you're doing, whether it's a half marathon, any longer distance, what your energy system is. So now it's like, all right, how do we optimize that? Well, we're going to try to push that lactate threshold higher. How do you do that? Okay, now what other qualities do we need to kind of continue pushing that envelope and making sure that you're more aerobically fit? What are the qualities for that? Start talking about like mitochondrial density and size and efficiency and lactate clearance. And that's where all that stuff comes in. And the variables are so much more easy to manipulate and control versus CrossFit, where it's like very difficult.
The Fitness Movement is brought to you by Zor Fitness. We offer coaching and individualized program design, as well as educational content for coaches and athletes. It's all one place, zorfitness.com.
Well, I had an idea today, and we're going to run it by day. We'll see where this goes. We're very unscripted today, which is actually pretty normal for us at this point.
Yeah, normal.
Yeah, there's one time where Chris and I were talking. It was completely unscripted, and he had somebody reach out to him that was like super impressed at like how thought out we were and like what we were saying. I was like, I'm glad it's coming across that way, because it was very impromptu.
I was just listening to a podcast about it. Like one of the guys was saying like he has this like approach when he makes posts that are like super well thought out. Like he does all the research, does all the cool designs, and the post gets a few likes, and people are like, oh, this is cool. And then he'll post some dumb shit, and then it's just like, that's the one, and he's just like, I'm just gonna post this, and that's the one that goes viral.
That's how I feel about video half the time when I post stuff. I'm like, it could take me literally like 90 minutes to edit this like 30-second teaser, and it'll get like, if just like depending when you post it, or like for whatever reason, it'll get like 20 likes. And I'm like, why did I take the time to do that? And then I'll post like a photo that I just like snapped when I walked out in the gym, and it'll get like 90. And I'm like, okay, what am I doing here?
Yeah.
Life of social media.
Yeah.
Don't understand the algorithm. But yeah, today basically I wanted to pick your brain, frankly. Since you have a lot more breadth of experience in this domain than me. But like one of the things that I've been thinking about, and it's just like really just been hyped up lately, is like all the Zone 2 stuff. And we don't have to specifically talk about Zone 2, but I think a lot of it will go that direction. And I want to talk about it. So it's sort of like, what is the role, and like, what is maybe the role? I mean, I think most people understand that, but it's like, how much is appropriate for someone who's a competitive CrossFitter relative to other domains? So like, you don't write the conditioning or like the sport work for your triathletes, but you at least see a lot of what goes on behind the scenes in the program as you're writing the strength components of their stuff. So you have a very good understanding of it. And then you yourself are going through pretty extensive endurance training at this point, prepping for like longer road races and things. So it's like, you also see it for yourself. So I guess let's start with your own training, and then we'll kind of take it to the two different ends of the spectrum, which is like even people who do this professionally, like triathletes, and then also like the CrossFitters on the other side of it. So what kind of like, take us through like a week, like how much do you keep track of like where you're at for different zones? Is it more based on like, I'm trying to get certain mileage in and varying like my paces relative to race times? How do you think about that?
Yeah, I think zones is kind of tricky, just because it's, when you're running, your heart rate zone is going to be a lot higher than what it would be when you're doing other aerobic work like cycling or, incline walking, Stairmaster on the air bike, rowing. You can maintain
showing your
heart rate
background here.
zones.
Stairmaster.
Stairmaster, you know where that's coming from. Speaking of, the other day I woke up, it was like Monday morning, and I was like, I'm just going to go to Anytime Fitness, which is one of the commercial gyms around here, and I'm just going to hop on the Stairmaster. And that was like
your urge in the morning? Not like,
yeah, I woke up and I was like, the Stairmaster.
I could crush a Monster and some Stairmaster right now.
Yeah. cracked open that energy drink so quick. But yeah, so running for those who are not, elite runners is hard to maintain certain zones. So
yes,
I try to stay away
Great
from
example.
that.
I mean, I feel like
runners.
most people who are not elite athletes who do track their zones are very aware of this, especially when running, where it's like a lot of people, they literally can't run in zone 2. Like, if you want me to at least jog, it's got to be at least zone 3, coach, because I can't do zone 2. That happens
for sure.
Quite a few athletes in that boat who are actually pretty decent CrossFitters, by the way.
Yeah, exactly. So they have the fitness, right? And I see it across the board, even with people who are great runners. Even for them, like, they usually push their zones up a little higher, the heart rate zone. So if it's something zone 2, it's actually like zone 3, but they just call it zone 2. And
like as high as they can in zone 2 without it going over.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they add like an extra 10 to 20 beats per minute to their zone 2, and that's what they consider zone 2. So most of the times I'm not considering zones for running, but instead I'm looking at like RPE, how hard is it, and also, more subjective feedback or pace. Because I like most people who have been running for a little bit, even if they're not great runners, just recreational runners like myself, you'll be familiar with what paces are easy, right? So it's like, hey, go on a 30-minute run at conversational pace, which is considered like, that's in quotations like zone 2. It's like conversational paces should be pretty easy stroll. Like you're going at, let's say, your 5K race pace plus 2 minutes per mile pace. So
let me think about that real quick. 5K, so that's probably like just over 6 minutes for me, so a little over 8 minutes. Yeah, that's probably even pushing zone 3 for me.
Yeah, exactly. But it's probably a lot easier, right? So you're able to maintain that.
It would feel conversational still.
Yeah, exactly.
Even if heart rate is approaching zone 3. Yeah. So maybe plus 2 to 3 minutes over 5K time trial, something along those lines.
Yeah. That's how I would I try to communicate that for if someone's they have a good understanding of what their paces are, usually 2 to 3 minutes above that. So when I'm doing my own program, I keep that in mind. I'm not I keep track of my heart rate. I look at it, but I'm not holding true to that. Although it does give me indication, right? Like, oh, hey, this run that's supposed to feel conversational and easy felt pretty hard, and my heart rate's also reflecting that because I'm at 180. That's usually I'm running at like a 150 at this pace. So that gives you just like another indicator if you're fatigued or whatever. But most of my runs are like that. So I would say in a week I'm running 4 to 5 times a week, and then doing 1 to 2 like cross training sessions, which that's where the Stairmaster comes in, and some indoor cycling. So and those are like my true easy work, and those are like true zone 2s because I can maintain zone 2s on those. But on the running side, I have 1 to 2 sessions of like threshold runs where a little bit faster pace, threshold or tempo intervals, and then the rest of them is pretty much steady state, conversational, easy-ish run, just building that aerobic base.
Yeah, and I feel like that might be one of the things that could be different depending on what you're preparing for. If you're preparing for a marathon, you're just going to have to spend so much like volume accumulation time that you're not going to do very much tempo or threshold type stuff. Where it's just like you just need to be pounding the pavement and collecting your miles sort of thing. Especially if someone hasn't really approached that kind of mileage before. If you're going back there after you've done it already, it's a little bit different. But yeah, I think for a lot of people that if they just haven't been there, it's like you're gonna have to spend the majority of your time just doing very easy volume accumulation, which we don't even care what the zone is, and you just gotta collect your miles. And it's like it's more about the feel, like you were saying, or like even like paces relative to like something like marathon.
Yeah, exactly. And I know a lot of resources out there use the whole 80-20 rule, which can be useful, but I think it's very vague. I think if you're running a lot and you're accumulating a lot of volume, the 80-20 rule is probably pretty accurate. But if you're a newer runner and you don't have as much volume, that's going to be a little bit different because you just need to run. And sometimes having an easy run isn't not doable, but like it's
they
not
almost can't run easy when you're starting out.
Exactly.
It might be like 80% walking, 20% running versus like easy running. There's like no such thing as easy running. Yeah, it's kind of like there's no such thing as easy CrossFit almost. Like you can practice movements, you could do EMOMs where it's like only certain like, you're only doing a certain number of reps or a certain amount of time on top of the minute or whatever. But it's like if you're actually doing CrossFit, it's really hard to make that below like it's hard to make that just like comfortable. Like for most people, you're like if you're doing burpees and snatches, even if it's anywhere close to mimicking what you're actually doing in the sport, you're going to be working hard. So then you have to get more creative in how you slice and dice it. So I think for something like CrossFit, like 80-20, it's like I think about more like, okay, we have to be able to get some easy work in here, otherwise you're going to explode. But it's like you're not focused on like a ratio necessarily. Or maybe it's like high and low sessions or some other way to do it, but it's not like I'm thinking about like volume as like, okay, this 80% of this should be easy. It's like, nah, like you're in an intensive sport, like a lot of it's going to be intense. And I'd be curious, like something like track cycling, how they would do it, because that's obviously like a super intense sport, but it's cyclical based. Or even like, something like sprint swimming, it would be probably a similar boat where it's like, they're not doing like a lot of like steady state stuff because that's not what they're asked to do in their sport. They're asked to be like explosive and fast. So it's like, sport demands just change. I mean, in a sport like CrossFit is so varied but at the same time, like a lot of the stuff is like in the middle, so to speak, where it's lactic and it's maybe in that 8 to 12 minute time domain for a lot of stuff. So it is going to be a challenge to just make that where it's sustainable because it's when you're doing it in sport context, it's not.
Yeah, and I think that's the tricky part with CrossFit, obviously, is like all the variance that's happening. So it's like what energy system should you really focus on? And you mentioned like the lactic there, and it's like it could there's so much variance there. There's so much where with running, it's like, if you're doing, whether it's a half marathon, any longer distance, what your energy system is. So now it's like, all right, how do we optimize that? Well, we're going to try to push that lactic threshold higher. How do you do that? Okay, now what other qualities do we need to kind of continue pushing that envelope and making sure that you're more aerobically fit? What are the qualities for that? You start talking about like mitochondrial density and size and efficiency and lactate clearance, and that's where all that stuff comes in. And the variables are so much more easy to manipulate and control versus CrossFit, where it's like very difficult.
Yeah, the most contrast example would be like, okay, you're preparing for a marathon in October. It's like, this is very specific. You know exactly what you need to be doing. It's one thing. It's running, and you know exactly how long it is, and you know exactly when the date is. You know the course. There's like everything about it is known except maybe like the weather, right? Or like some very like odd factors outside of that. But it's like with CrossFit especially, but even like something like triathlon. Okay, now you have 3 disciplines, right? And you might race in a couple different distances. It's like, or things along those lines. So it starts to vary a little bit, where you at least have some different movements that you have to account for and like have to manage volume between the 3. But again, something like CrossFit, it is so varied. It's like, okay, say I don't know this, but say I'm competing in Crash Crucible in October. It's like, okay, I probably know there's like 6 or 7 squared events, and I could probably guess like some of the movements. Like there'll probably be running, there'll probably be some other ergs in there. There's gonna be some weightlifting, like. But outside of that, it's like, man, I don't know exactly. Like, there's so many unknowns. So, the other thing that you mentioned that I feel like it depends, is that it really depends on the type of like ability level of the CrossFit athlete that we're talking about. Because there's people who are like pretty rudimentary in some of like their skill development things where it just doesn't like adding in zone 2 would be like the worst thing you could do for them. Because it's like you're just wasting their time when they should just be getting better at their sport. It's like, I'm trying to think of a good example. Anyway, it's like they just need to be getting better at the thing. And if they spend all this time doing this low-level conditioning, not that it's unuseful, but it's not going to translate to their sport context anyway because their proficiency is so low that it just doesn't even matter. Probably the best example would be like throw somebody in a pool who like doesn't know how to swim properly and they have their head up the whole time and they're like not, they're not even having their head in the water to breathe. And it's like, okay, we're going to do 100 repeats on this clock and do this. It's like, bro, they just need to get better at swimming with like somebody who knows how to teach them. So yeah. I think for some of the higher level athletes, which that's where you can start to pull in a little bit more of like the minutia of, things like zone training, and much more things can be heart rate based, and you're getting a little bit more into the nitty gritty because it's like they are starting to search for the margins a little bit more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And I was trying to think of an analogy as well as you were coming up with your analogy. And it's like teaching someone Olympic lifting who has never lifted in general before, done any strength training.
It's like giving the percentage work when it's like their first week lifting. It's like,
yeah,
they're going to lift 20 pounds more. Just like have them lift. like they don't need to be doing this linear progression or whatever. It's like, just let them lift.
Exactly. So I think that's a really good example. Like if you're a CrossFit athlete, like zone 2 work or conversational pace work, more aerobic work will be useful later down the road when you have that level of fitness already. And like now you're trying to push that, as I mentioned, like that threshold and those limits a little bit more. But initially, like you're working on all these skills, I think just doing CrossFit in general is going to move the needle in the direction that you need it to in terms of fitness and your aerobic capacity. And so just doing CrossFit, and then eventually you're going to hit a point where it's like, okay, now let's introduce these, because you're doing so much volume and you're you have that high intensity work so often, and it's so structured throughout the week and with your plan. Now let's put in that, like, we still need to get more volume in and work in, but we can't continue giving you that high threshold stuff. So let's put in this easy aerobic stuff that can kind of complement what you're already doing, but also accumulate that volume so that you can keep pushing.
Yeah. And I think as I'm thinking about like the type of people who I write it for more, it's one of the another thing is like how many sessions they have, which is like so obvious. Like when you think about it, it's like, well, duh, if you're just not training that much, you don't get to add this in. It's like the important stuff goes in first. So it's like, if you only have 6 sessions to train in a week of 90 minutes each, like maybe you get like 10 minutes of like a zone 2 pace at the end, but it's like, I don't even care if you use heart rate at that point. It's just going to be like cool down bike. It's like, okay, once you've gotten to a certain threshold in some of these things where it's like, okay, if you now have like 6 or 7 sessions by the time Wednesday night's over, like you're not even halfway through your week. It's like, okay, something here has to give in terms of intensity, because you can't push 6 or 7 sessions in like 72 hours that high, or something bad is going to happen. So it's like, when you're dealing with that problem, that's when you start to be like, okay, we can't just, I mean, you could, but you shouldn't, especially not year round, just continue to like hammer intensity for all of those. So it's like, how can we intelligently build some of this like lower level work in that's going to be supportive to your sport work, and then also like good from like a joint perspective, from like a nervous system perspective, because you're just getting more oxygenation to the system as well. So those are maybe some of the things I start to think about for CrossFit athletes when I start to decide when I should like add in more zone 2 work.
Yeah. And I'm sure I think you do this as well, where if you're working with like a CrossFit athlete and you're trying to get in zone 2 work, I don't keep it exclusively like, oh, just go 30 minutes on the rower or running or whatever, like I'll put in some odd object stuff in there, kind of make it a little bit of CrossFit-y with like rounds and intervals, but like keep it at an easy pace or an easy RPE or effort level, so that, you know, you're still hitting that quality, but the quality is a little bit more specific to CrossFit and the movements.
Yeah, normally if it's like, 30 minutes zone 2, it's like maybe that's if someone's doing like at least 3 a.m. sessions and they have to be like short and sweet, maybe like one of those becomes like a 30-minute zone 2 bike or something.
Yeah.
And like the other one might be intervals and the other one might be mixed or whatever. And then it's like active recovery days are a great time for as someone who needs that kind of supportive work, and they're not going to be in a really trash place where like zone 2 is even more than they should be doing on recovery day. Then it's like that's a good place to add it in. Sometimes I'll like do like bookends to a session, so like 10 or 15 minutes on the bike at like a zone 2 pace at the beginning, 15 minutes zone 2 at the end. They just got 30 minutes of zone 2. You add that 3 spots in their week, and it's like, okay, you just accumulated a couple hours of zone 2 work. Or you could even do it where you do it more as like active recovery, which might not even be zone 2, right? Which is, again, we're talking zone 2 a lot, but I don't think it's just like easier cyclical work, let's call it. Where it's like active recovery pace between intervals for especially people who are super powerful, where if you just give them complete rest, they can kind of fake their way through an interval. Whereas like if you put them on active recovery, it becomes more sport specific for them in terms of like the paces they're holding when they actually do their intervals. But then it also is like all the benefits that you would get from something along the lines of like that lower zone work also comes along with it. So it's like, okay, you're doing, 18, 15, 12, GHD, bar facing burpee, dumbbell, hang clean and jerk, 70. You're going to do that 3 times and you rest 5 minutes between on the bike between each one. Something like that, right? Where it's like, if you just have them rest for 5 minutes, they're going to be like completely recharged and like ready to smash the next one. Where it's like something like 5 minutes on the bike, as simple as that will be like enough to keep a little bit of like breathing elevated and a little bit of heart rate up, that it'll be more like 15 to 20 minute AMRAP pace when they actually go through, which is like maybe more sport specific for them.
Yeah. And I like that too, because it kind of correlates with running as well. When you're doing like intervals and you're going at, let's say, 5 minutes at a threshold pace, and then you're going to do 5 minutes at an easy like recovery pace. So then you're kind of teaching your body with that lactate like clearance side of things.
Right,
so,
and especially for people who are super powerful, like that's a necessary thing to like keep in like almost year round for somebody like that.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's an easy way to do it. So instead of them just completely resting, like put them on the bike, do something easy, just kind of get keep that going and teach their body with that. And I think that plays like a really good role with that. Like it's very similar to that threshold training. And I think that's something that, especially as you get closer to competition, if you're racing, right, you're going to be doing that. If you're so far out from a race, then most of it's going to be just like volume building and getting all the mileage in. But as you get closer, even like on your second phase or third phase, as you're getting closer to that race, you want to work those type of qualities. And then the same thing with like CrossFit too.
So for the professional triathletes you work with, again, not that you're necessarily writing it, but you see under the hood for a lot of that stuff, are they doing it off of paces a lot of the time? Or is it like, for example, you were saying like, okay, for my training, I'm going off, maybe it's plus or minus off my 5K or off my 10K time, or even like those descriptors where you might say like conversational pace or something. Like how are they doing it for the most part?
It ranges. So like on the bike, they'll have either their wattage of their maybe like a FTP for when they're biking, or some type of like power metric there's also the heart rate component with it too. So they're all very familiar with using they carry that around, the heart rate straps, chest straps. So they're very familiar with that. So it ranges, and then some of it's pacing. So it is a mixture of all of it.
Yeah.
And for example, like there was one session where we were preparing them for a race in Miami that many of them were going to, and we just had this really long aerobic session on the indoor treadmill in the weight room. So they were just taking up all the treadmills, and that was heart rate based. So yeah, it was like the whole team, like no one else could use the treadmill. The whole team's using all of them. But that was heart rate based. So they all were, using that to kind of dictate what pace they were going at. And so that allows for flexibility, right? So like if there's a week where someone, or a session where someone's feeling good and they can like push the pace a little bit, but they're still kind of like in that easier zone for them, then like cool, go for it. Other times where it's more like, the auto regulation on the other side, where it's like, oh, feeling like crap, things weren't feeling too good, that pace is going to go a little slower than what maybe it normally is, and that's fine as long as you're staying in that RPE zone, desired zone. Yeah.
I mean, to me, as I'm thinking about it, I feel like it's a very similar thing to strength training in terms of like percentage and RPE, because I use a mixture of the two when I write designs. I use heart rate for people who have that available, as well as off paces, as well as off descriptors of RPEs. So conversational pace, cruise pace, smooth, moderate, strong, like that kind of language. So yeah, if I'm writing strength training, it might be like, and these are the same arguments that people have for that. It's like, well, RPE varies day to day. It's like, well, that could be seen as a good thing for most people. Like if you feel like crap, your percentages don't move. It's like, okay, maybe you round down instead of up, but like that's your extent, is you get like 5 pounds of wiggle room. Whereas like RPE, it just meets you where you're at for the day. Which again, the bad thing about it is that people could use it as, and kind of like lie to themselves and be like, you know what? No, this was okay. Like that was a 7. I was like, bro, that looks so easy. That was like 5 to 6 tops. Right.
Yeah.
And maybe that's some of that. I think it's less about athletes being soft for people who are competitive, at least that I coach. And I think much more of it is just like, if it's someone who just doesn't have that much experience, they just don't know. Like, that was actually an 8. You thought it was a 9. Like, by the way that moved and by how your face is, you're telling me it's like, that's a 7 to 8. You have way more in the tank.
Yeah.
Where again, it's like something like percentages, like the example we used earlier, like percentages for people who are just starting out, like terrible idea, like inappropriate for them. And then other times there's people who like, okay, you hit this massive PR when you were 15 pounds heavier 2 years ago. Like, Day, are you still using the same percentages you did when like all you cared about was like powerlifting? Like, I hope not. But people do that all the time that like I coach. It's like, I hit this, when I was 38, I'm now 47 and I'm still using that same, like, bro, like don't do that. So
yeah, I
think the same things can be applied to as it is to zone work, where it's like people can say, oh, conversational pace, and they'll be like, they're out there like huffing and puffing. It's like, that is not conversational, which is like, to me, that's one of the benefits of something like zone training, is like, even though there's gonna be variation in it, if you like, hey, you keep it as a zone 3 average, then it's, when we look back and like see that it's trended up, it's like very objective, which is so nice to be able to point out. Like, okay, your zone 3 run pace went from, a 10:27 pace to now it's a 9:47 pace 4 weeks later. It's like, that is so awesome to see that kind of stuff, and it's like you can't fake that.
Yeah. I think having a mixture of that RPE and percentages, it's also like super important for those who are training multiple qualities at once, because there's all that conflict, right? Like CrossFit, so many movements throughout the week, throughout the sessions that you're doing, so many different qualities of like how hard you're pushing things. So it's like a good powerlifting program for someone who is doing solely powerlifting, it's going to have more percentages because they're maximizing what they can to
and so much
increase.
is controlled.
Yeah, so much is controlled, right? So, someone who's using percentage based for powerlifting, it makes sense. But if you're using solely percentage based stuff for CrossFit or for your strength training, for endurance work, if you're an endurance athlete and you're strength training, like I feel like that's not the way to do it. Like, you got to have a mixture. And honestly, I go more to the side of RPE in that case because, yeah. And then it teaches people too, like how hard you should be pushing. Because a lot of times, like for someone who isn't familiar with strength training, if they're younger or if they've been doing just like endurance work and now they're getting to strength training, they're not going to know their 1 rep max. And if you have them do a 1 rep max, whatever, squat, bench, whatever movement you want to do, it's probably not going to be their true 1 rep max, because there's the safety stuff that you have to consider as well. So it gets kind of fuzzy.
That's the other thing too, is like you were saying in powerlifting, that's probably the best example, and weightlifting too. It's like they do more percentages because it's like, especially when the frequency of which they're lifting, especially a weightlifter, I feel like probably even more so than powerlifting, because powerlifting is more of like a true measurement of strength, whereas like weightlifting, there's much more like coordination and skill timing involved. Like throwing a baseball is very different than a deadlift. And like weightlifting is somewhere in the middle between those two things and snatching. So like, I think with them, the frequency is very high at which they like touch different movements. So it's, if you were just to go off RPE all the time, unless you would be like very like undulating it a lot, you would get kind of confusing almost in a way where it's like, you need to be able to like clearly explain to athlete like where there's going to be undulations in their program, especially for like a higher level weightlifter, because they're just going to have to do more like accumulation of like that 70 to 80% type range, and that's kind of 70, like a 7 to 8 for RPE really doesn't like subjectively like feel that different a lot of times, whereas like 70 to 80%, if you're lifting and you're doing that for like 8 doubles and you're doing that over multiple weeks, you could run an entire progression between those two things. And so like you almost need to get a little more specific with what you're doing there.
So I know you programmed for someone recently for a half marathon. I think her name's Lydia.
Yeah. Is
there like any time when you were programming for her through that, like leading up to that half marathon, where you're just like, I'm going to try this approach out, or something that changed in your normal programming approach?
I didn't experiment with her a whole lot because she was only 6 weeks out from her half marathon and like hadn't run more than like 5 miles when she came to me. So we were like, all right, we got to get on top of this. So a lot of it was like, I think we did her long day coming off of her weekend, which is like rest. So it was like, or maybe I forget. I take that back. Maybe it was on the weekend. But either way, we like put a rest day before that so that she was like fully recovered and could like feel actually good when she was doing her longer runs, because like pushing the volume was the thing that mattered for her. And like most of the time when I did that, it was like run walk intervals or things where it was just like allowing her to spend more time on her feet and actually accumulate the mileage. So it was a lot of like run walk, and then like the walk I would just try to keep it like at a brisk pace, and then most of the running stuff was like based off like half marathon type pace. And maybe I would say like, I wouldn't say slightly faster, but I would say like maybe it would be like a minute faster or something along those lines. I would kind of use a lot of the language was around half marathon pace, and then maybe it was like faster than that. And then I don't know if she had a chest strap at that time, so I don't think I used heart rate at all. I think it was all based off performance metrics. And at that point, you're so close to your race too that I almost don't care about heart rate as much, where it's like, as long as you're actually running at a pace that you could sustain for, let's say, 2 hours, then it's like that's what matters. Not, I don't care if you're in zone 3 or zone 4. Like, because there's going to be individual differences with that too, where like some people could run a half marathon in zone 5 the entire time.
Dude. Yeah. I think if I go running with someone, like what I notice is we have the same RPE, we're going at the same effort level. My heart rate will be like 185. And
that's like my max.
Theirs will be like, mine goes up to like 205, which is like scary. Yeah. So mine's always significantly higher.
Do you have any like this is off topic, and you can finish your thought first, but I'm curious if you have any like characteristics of athletes who have a really high max heart rate.
Yeah. I mean, like, I can think of a few, right? I'm thinking of like people who I know who have a high max heart rate, and it's not more of like athletic qualities, but more of like similar personality types.
Okay.
What I've noticed. So it ends up, what I've noticed is like ends up being people who are like more anxious or like stressed. They're just like that type of person. And what I notice is like if I'm checking their heart rate or if I'm paying attention to it, they usually are higher. They can like go a little higher. Where the ones who I know who are like more, max heart rate. And then the ones who I know who can maintain a pretty even keel like heart rate during their training and, you know, their max heart rate isn't as high. They're more of like a relaxed personality. So it's more of like a personality thing, what I've noticed. Yeah. Which is kind of interesting.
I've seen some people who are like more delivery limited.
More what?
Delivery limited. Like people who bias like strength and power can create a lot of muscular tension. Oftentimes have a higher heart rate, max heart rate. And then people sometimes who have more extensive like endurance training, it almost like drives their max heart rate down, which is confusing, I think, to a lot of people who are just kind of looking at it at a glance. But that isn't always the case too. Like I know some people who are definitely not that way and still have really max heart rates. So that's why I was curious, because I don't really have like, there are certain characteristics that I see, but then it also is just kind of like, I don't want to say luck at the draw because I don't think that's the case, but like other factors genetically or whatever that are going on.
Yeah, I think that's one where I think there's a lot of variables in play there. Someone's genetic makeup, I think the stressors, how they are as a person. Because I'm also thinking about like resting heart rates too, and there's just some people who I know who are just like so fit and like so like elite in that realm, but their resting heart rate is kind of high for someone at that level. So it's like, right. And because we all know there's so many things that come into play there.
Yeah. Do you see any correlation between resting heart rate and max heart rate?
I'm thinking of like a few people. So I have a few people in mind, and of that small group of people, I'm thinking of just 5. Usually those that have like the lower resting heart rate tend to have the lower max heart rate, which you mentioned is like confusing, right? Because you would think they'd be able to go up a little higher, but I think they're just
I think most people who are just like a layman looking at it would think like lower resting heart rate would mean that like you're really fit, and if you're really fit, you should be able to perform well. And if you perform well, drive your heart rate up. But it's actually like, nah, it doesn't usually work that way.
Yeah, and I mean, so like, you know, Lydia, she's over here doing a bunch of triathlons, 70.3s, and there was one race where she finished, and she mentioned that at the end of the run, her heart rate was like 160, and it's like 160. That's how I feel. Like that's my
I wake
that's
up in the
my
morning,
heart
drink a
rate
Ghost,
when I'm
and I'm
like
at
walking.
160.
Yeah, when I crack that first that can of Ghost, and I'm like, starting my warm up before I run. That's my heart rate. And she just finished a whole 70.3, and her heart rate's 160.
Do you know what her max is?
So I don't know her max. I'll ask her.
But like, I'm probably a pretty good example of that. Like, there's people who are like within like a minute they'd be over my max heart rate and hold that for a full 5K, no problem. And it's like, yeah, I've seen my heart rate maybe get to 180 once this year.
That is insane.
And that's doing like, acid bath progressions and 4K time trials running and things like that.
That is insane. I've seen 180 like at least every day.
Yeah. So there's like I think maybe some of this was, and this doesn't explain though, like obviously again there's individual differences, but I think a lot of people, I think there's research on this, but I couldn't point it out to you, but it's like as people sometimes get more efficient, like they'll have more cardiac preload of the heart, so the heart fills up more and like stretches, and so they'll obviously like that's encourage higher cardiac output, but then also it can drive down max heart rate, so because the heart takes time to fill up. So if it, like, think of like the heart, everybody compares the heart to like a sponge, right? Where if you have to let the sponge fill up and then you squeeze it and the water comes out. Whereas like if you're just continually squeezing the sponge as fast as you can, it's actually not filling up, so it's not efficient. So you have to like give the time it needs to actually fill up, and then you're gonna get good cardiac output. So there's obviously a sweet spot to that where it's the more often you can do that with maintaining. It's similar to breathing in that way, where it's like if you can breathe deeply and you can breathe fast, that's going to be your recipe for success. Obviously, it's the same thing for cardiac output. Like it's heart rate times why am I blanking on the word? How much comes out per beat? I don't know why I'm blanking on it.
Stroke volume?
Yes, stroke volume. So it's heart rate times stroke volume. So that's your equation for cardiac output. Obviously, if you can maximize both of those, that's going to get your best cardiac output. But there is like a ceiling similar to like, okay, you can only maintain tidal volume with a certain respiration frequency. Like we were talking to the people who invented the Breathe Way Better, and it was like above 60 is pretty inefficient in terms of like maintaining tidal volume. And I would guess like north of 200 beats a minute, it just probably gets more and more inefficient at like clearing the heart of blood, would be my guess.
Yeah. And I know
and it's probably dependent on who the athlete is too, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I know there's a guy who he's well known in the conditioning space, and most of his conditioning is known in like the MMA world, Joel Jameson.
Yeah, I know the name.
And then he mentions like a lot of that easy aerobic work being like hypertrophy training for the heart, so that it can get stronger and like expand more and hold more of that volume. Kind of like what you were saying. So, yeah.
Yeah, and that's one of the things, like, obviously the heart's a muscle, so it's going to adapt, but it's also got to be slow twitch, so you got to give it time. So you got to stress it, but you got to give it time. And, like, respiratory musculature is the same way, right? Like, where the super fast twitch, yeah, you breathe super fast, but then you die because you stop breathing because you need to recover. It's like, that's not how we're wired. It's like, we need to be able to just have that sucker run until you die of an old age. So it's like, it's going to be super slow twitch. And that includes the heart. So it's like, yeah, you have to put stress on it, but you have to be able to do that over a duration of time. So it's like, if you want some of those cardiac qualities, or especially qualities of like blood, if you want like EPO production, stuff like that, it's just going to like take longer. Like cyclists spend so many hours on a bike, and that's one of the big reasons why. It's like, there's even more adaptations that happen in like the blood, and yeah, and especially the heart when you just go out into those longer durations. Whereas like some of the other qualities that are like maybe more muscular, maybe more like uptake related, are going to be better off suited in like higher intensity type zones. Like sometimes you just got to spend your time.
Yeah. And again, like I know we keep correlating it back. It's very similar to like lifting, right? It's like you're going to get the different qualities if you're doing a lot of like volume training, hypertrophy work with the muscle fibers are gonna respond a certain way. And then if you're doing, you know, higher intensity work, powerlifting, high loads, low reps, you're going to get a different quality there, and different response. So you were
Your mic saying it's about time for us to be done.
yes, it was like it's falling asleep. But yeah.
I think that's a good analogy because I think most people who are going to be listening to this have a background in strength training, at least to some degree. So it's like that's pretty intuitive to a lot of people of like, okay, if you do 3 reps, you're getting a different stimulus than if you did 12 or if you did 300. So
yeah,
it's a good comparison.
And it's just hard to be training at that intensity multiple times back to back. So it's the same thing, right? If you're running, you don't want to do like high threshold stuff, especially if you're not an experienced or an elite runner. High threshold stuff like back to back. That's just
you probably can't. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's probably like the best way to explain it. It's like you have to be able to undulate something in the program. So it's like if you're just going off RPE and you're a lifter, there might not be like enough variation for you. Like obviously like there's different things you can select from, but it makes it hard. Like RPE is like best suited for like certain ranges, I feel like. And same with like percentages. It's like, are you going to write a percentage of like 101%? Like, no.
Exactly.
Like for something like percentages, like there's like, okay, we want you to like be working in this specific range for a specific reason. And we can't just do that the entire week. And also you can't do that cycle to cycle doing the same thing. It's like, this is playing a particular role in your program so that something else can get pushed up at some point down the line. And it's like similar, even if you're, I don't want to say just running because running is like a very big deal, but if you're just a runner and all you care about is running, you still need to be able to undulate your program throughout your week at some point because you can't just like keep smashing the same qualities the entire time because like your body is not going to respond well to that. So it's like, okay, I have to either be able to vary my intensity zones, my duration, my interval times, some sort of factors that allow me to strategically move forward towards the goals I have down the road.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's the issue a lot of people have in the beginning is they just want to run fast all the time. And it's
Ricky Bobby.
Yes, yeah. And they don't know that the Stairmaster is there for them. And it is a great tool.
Yeah. But I feel like a lot of beginners, they probably can get away with things for a while.
Yeah.
Like, chances are if you're running either like every day, you're either built really well for running or you're not running very fast.
Yeah.
And if you're not running very fast, then it's okay to run every day. It doesn't matter. It's like walking almost, right? Where it's like, okay, now if you're chasing performance, you got to undulate stuff more. You got to have intentional seasons where you're building, intentional seasons where you're pulling back and letting yourself recover and repairing your physiology and just being a little bit more smart about it.
Yeah.
So if that's you, you should hire Day. Because Day knows all about these things and will track your physiology for you and make sure that you're progressing optimally towards your goals. Was that a good call to action at the end of all this?
That was good. That was really good.
Yeah.
You're getting good at this. The whole salesy stuff.
Yeah, so good. Well, sweet. I had fun talking about this. Yeah, if you guys got questions, you can let us know. And we, honestly, like, I would love to do more, like, audience-based stuff. I feel like we don't do that a lot, but, because we enjoy talking amongst ourselves about shop-related things. But, yeah, if people got questions, just reach out to one of us on wherever we're at, and we'll get back to you. Yeah.
Cool.
Sweet. Thanks for doing this. This was fun.
Yeah, it was good.
Thanks for listening today. If you're someone who just started listening to the show, I would encourage you to subscribe so you can stay up to date. If you're someone who's been listening for a while, I would encourage you to rate and review the show. And lastly, the best thing that you can do to support our work is also the best thing that you can do for your performance. And that is by hiring one of our coaches. Until next time, stay the course.